Saw Gerrera, a man who fought for freedom only to become one of Star Wars' most tragic casualties in Rogue One and Andor. We see the last broken remnants of the man who once led rebellions with fire in his eyes. His arc is one of the darkest, most heart-wrenching in all of Star Wars, and yet it's so essential to the story of the galaxy. Saw's journey is a testament to how war, loss, and paranoia can change even the most passionate freedom fighter into a man on the edge of sanity. Welcome back to Star Wars Fanatic, the YouTube channel where we go in depth into Star Wars lore and its characters to give you the most in-depth Star Wars breakdowns. Today we'll be talking about Saw Gerrera, from resisting the Separatists on Onderon to extremist rebel fighter against the Empire, to Saw Gerrera's tragic death in Rogue One. What made him the paranoid shell of a man that we saw in Rogue One and Andor? How did he fall so far from what he once was? Well, we're going to explore the character that Forest Whitaker brought to life, Saw Gerrera. But before I go on, here's a quick word from our sponsor, me. Yeah, listen to the tiny voice.
Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and give the video a big stupid thumbs up. It really does help get my message across the Star Wars fandom. If you subscribe and like the video, it will give you a sense of happiness and euphoria, unlike anything you've experienced. It'll make your family love you more, and your water will turn to beer. Yeah, beer. And the type of beer you get is up to the will of the Force. If you get O'Doul suddenly shooting out of your shower, not my fault. If you don't subscribe and like, I'm sure your family will still like you just fine, and water will be good enough. But it's better to be safe and subscribe anyway.
Yeah, I love that tiny voice. Anyways, what led to Saw Gerrera's transformation? How did Saw Gerrera become the man who trusts no one, not even his allies? Today we'll take a deep dive into Saw's entire journey, from his early days fighting alongside the Jedi on Onderon to his final moments in Rogue One. We'll also explore how Forest Whitaker brought this character to life, the deep scars left by the fall of the Jedi, and how the lighting and music surrounding him tell a story of their own. Saw's journey begins on his home planet of Onderon. It was here that Saw Gerrera first rose to prominence as a leader of a local resistance cell fighting against the Separatist occupation during the Clone Wars. Back then, he wasn't the man consumed by suspicion and grief. He was passionate, full of hope, and determined to liberate his homeworld. And he had help, the Jedi. Yes, that's right. Saw fought with the Jedi under the guidance of Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano. Saw learned how to wage war against an enemy that vastly outgunned him. The Jedi taught him guerrilla tactics, how to use the terrain to his advantage, and how to rally others to this cause. But beyond the strategy, the Jedi gave him something even more important: hope. The hope that together they could defeat the droids and that Onderon could one day be free. But we all know how that story ends, don't we? The Jedi were betrayed. Order 66 happened. The entire Republic fell, replaced by the tyranny of the Galactic Empire. And Saw? He was left standing alone. His allies, the ones who had fought by his side, trained him, bled for him, taught him, were suddenly gone. An entire order wiped out overnight. This betrayal left an internal scar on Saw Gerrera. How could the very heroes of the galaxy, the Jedi, fall? If they couldn't stop the Empire, who could? Saw learned a harsh lesson in the Clone Wars. Never trust anyone to win the fight for you. If the Jedi could fall, so could the rebellion. From this point on, Saw's paranoia grew, fed by the belief that anyone could betray him, just like the Jedi were betrayed by the very clones they fought alongside. Before Saw fully descended into the shadows of distrust and extremism, he experienced one more devastating loss: his sister, Saw Gerrera. Now, for those who don't know, Saw wasn't just Saw's sister. She was his co-leader in the Resistance, and in many ways his moral compass. Where Saw was impulsive and quick to anger, Saw was calm, strategic, and beloved by the people of Onderon. She was everything Saw aspired to be. Her death during the battle for Onderon was a deafening moment for Saw Gerrera. She fell from a cliff after being shot down, dying in Saw's arms. This loss broke him, and his belief in the righteous cause they fought for. The Empire may not have killed Stila directly, but they were responsible in Saul's mind, and when the dust settled, Saul was left with nothing but rage. Stila's death was the last straw. With her gone, Saul's tactics became increasingly violent. He no longer believed in mercy or restraint. If his sister, the best of them, could die, then there were no lines he wouldn't cross. This marked the beginning of Saul's transformation into the extremist we see in Andor and Rogue One. We see Saw Gerrera again in Star Wars animated series Rebels. By this time, he's already paranoid and willing to do things other rebels couldn't bring themselves to do. In his mind, the Geonosians were just as responsible for the death of Stila as anybody, and now there was one Geonosian remaining after the Empire purged their planet. Bringing them to extinction wasn't just a passing thought in Saw's mind, it was a goal. But when the Ghost Crew swayed him into understanding that all life had value, Saul disappeared into the galaxy to resume fighting elsewhere. Fast forward to the Star Wars series Andor, and we see the fully evolved version of Saw Gerrera, a man who trusts no one. His paranoia is palpable, and it colors every interaction he has. The weight of all the loss, betrayal, and isolation has twisted him into a figure consumed by distrust. Saul doesn't just fight the Empire, he fights everyone who doesn't share his exact view of how the war should be fought. One of the most fascinating dynamics in Andor is Saw Gerrera's relationship with Luthen Rael. Luthen, a master manipulator, tries to convince Saul to work with other rebel factions, but Saul refuses at first. He sees collaboration as weakness, and his eyes dart with suspicion, searching for any sign of betrayal. His paranoia has isolated him from the broader rebellion, and the lighting and cinematography in Andor reflect this perfectly. Notice how Saul is often bathed in shadows, the light barely touching him. His world is dark, and so is his mindset. The music, too, tells a story. Subtle, dissonant tones underscore his scenes, emphasizing his fractured state of mind. It's all about mood here. Saul's world is one of suspicion and dread, and the show's creators make sure we feel that every time he's on screen. When we see Saul again in Rogue One, he's older, broken physically and mentally, but still fighting. This is a man who has lost everything: his sister, his faith in the Jedi, and any hope of working with the broader rebellion. Yet despite everything, he remains a key player in the fight against the Empire. One of the most powerful aspects of Rogue One is Saw Gerrera's connection to Jyn Erso. For Jyn Erso, Saul was once a father figure. He took her in after the Empire took everything from her. But Saul's paranoia even pushed her away. When we see them reunite in Rogue One, it's clear that their relationship is fractured. Jyn understandably cold towards him, and Saw Gerrera, for all his strength, is visibly shaken by seeing her again. It's an emotional moment. That line, "Did they send you here to kill me?" is haunting. It shows just how far gone Saul is. He can't even trust the girl he raised. His paranoia has reached such heights that he sees betrayal in even the most personal relationships. And yet, beneath all that suspicion, there's a glimpse of the man he used to be, the one who cared deeply about Jyn and her future. Another key interaction is with Bodhi Rook, the Imperial pilot who defected. Bodhi is terrified when he meets Saul, and who can blame him? By this point, Saul has a reputation as a ruthless, unhinged leader. Saul's methods of extracting information, his use of the monstrous Borgullet, show just how far he's fallen into the abyss of paranoia. It's a chilling scene, and it speaks volumes about the lengths Saul will go to for what he sees as the greater good. His distrust of Bodhi is understandable, given everything he's been through. But it's also a symptom of the tragedy that has become his life. Saw Gerrera is now so consumed by suspicion that he's willing to use torturous methods on those who might be his allies. Now let's talk about Forest Whitaker himself, the incredible actor behind Saw Gerrera. Whitaker has spoken at length about how he approached playing Saul. He didn't just see Saul Guerrera as a one-dimensional extremist. He saw him as a man broken by years of war and loss, a man whose passion for freedom was slowly eroded by the horrors he witnessed and the betrayals he experienced. In an interview, Forest Whitaker explained that he wanted to bring depth to Saw, portraying him not just as a soldier, but as a human being grappling with profound pain, real human emotion. Whitaker described Saw Gerrera's evolution from a hopeful revolutionary to a paranoid, isolated man as the result of being abandoned by those he trusted, especially the Jedi. Whitaker saw Saw Gerrera as a victim of war, someone who had lost so much that he no longer knew who he could rely on. He also talked about how Saw's paranoia became a coping mechanism, an almost logical response to the chaotic, violent galaxy around him. From the moment he first portrayed Saw Gerrera in live action in Rogue One, Whitaker embraced the physicality of the role, including Saw's heavy breathing, his damaged limbs, and the way he moved. These physical attributes reflected not only the toll war had taken on Saw's body, but also the weight of the emotional scars he carried. The breathing device Saw uses in Rogue One is symbolic of how fragile he's become. Every breath is labored. Every movement is a reminder of the pain he's endured. Whitaker noted that he wanted audiences to feel that struggle, to understand that Saw, once a fierce and hopeful warrior, is now barely holding himself together. Let's talk about the artistry behind the Star Wars universe for a moment, specifically the use of lighting and music in the portrayal of Saw Gerrera. If you pay close attention to Saw's scenes in both Andor and Rogue One, you'll notice how the environment reflects his mental state. In Andor, the lighting is often stark and cold. Shadows loom heavily around Saw, highlighting the isolation he feels. The dim lighting adds to the sense that Saw Gerrera lives in the margins of the rebellion, separated from the larger efforts by his own distrust. When Luthen Rael visits Saw, notice how the room is bathed in dim, almost industrial light, casting harsh shadows across Saw's face. It's as if the very space around him mirrors his fractured mind. Similarly, in Rogue One, Saw's lair is a dark, oppressive space. The use of dim, flickering lights and the constant haze of dust and smoke create an atmosphere of claustrophobia and decay. It's a physical manifestation of Saw's mental state. His world is crumbling, and he's trapped inside it. And not to mention, there's a reason Saw Gerrera picked Jedha as his base, close to the Jedi Temple, people he was close to. The music, too, plays a critical role in shaping our understanding of Saw Gerrera. In both Andor and Rogue One, the score often takes an eerie, dissonant quality whenever Saw is on screen. These subtle musical cues emphasize the tension and mistrust that defines his character. It's not the grand, sweeping themes we associate with other rebels in Star Wars. No, for Saw, the music is jagged, fragmented, just like his psyche. Saw's story reaches its inevitable conclusion in Rogue One. By the time Jyn Erso reunites with him, Saw knows that his end is near. He's no longer the man who led a rebellion on Onderon. He's a relic of a bygone era, clinging to a war that's consumed him. But even in his final moments, Saw remains defiant. When the Death Star fires on Jedha City, Saw makes no attempt to escape. He knows his time's up, and in a way, he welcomes it. It's a fitting end for a man who spent years fighting a losing battle both against the Empire and against his own demons. Saw Gerrera also knows he may be accepted back into the larger rebellion, led by Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, but too much has happened since he was an active member. There's too much distrust on both sides for him. His extremist tactics cost many innocent lives, lives he saw as worthy for the greater victory. This would ultimately put Saw Gerrera into a prison, or worse by the time the war ends. Those final words, "Save the rebellion, save the dream," are a haunting reminder of who Saw once was. Beneath the layers of paranoia and extremism, there's still a man who believes in the cause, but he's too broken to be the one to see it through. His death is both tragic and poetic. A man who gave everything for freedom, only to lose himself in the process. While Saw Gerrera's story ends in Rogue One, his legacy lives on throughout the Star Wars universe. Saw Gerrera is one of the most complex and morally ambiguous characters in the franchise. His extremism and paranoia are a cautionary tale about the costs of war, while other characters like Mon Mothma or Bail Organa represent the more idealistic side of the rebellion, and Luke Skywalker as the heroic side. Saw embodies the darker, grittier reality of what it means to fight against tyranny. Saw's influence can be seen in characters across the Star Wars canon. He appears in Star Wars Rebels, the Clone Wars, and even the Bad Batch. Always, it's the symbol of a rebel willing to do whatever it takes. And while other rebel leaders may be distancing themselves from his methods, there's no denying that Saw's ruthlessness played a crucial role in the rebellion's success. Even in death, Saw's legacy is felt. Characters like Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor represent the next generation of rebels who have to grapple with the moral complexities of war, just as Saw did. And while they may not agree with Saw's tactics, they can't escape the reality that sometimes fighting for freedom means making impossible choices, all the way up until the end. In the end, Saw Gerrera's story is a tragic one. He was a man who dedicated his life to fighting oppression, but in doing so he lost everything: his sister, his faith in others, and ultimately his own humanity. Saw's descent into paranoia and extremism is a stark reminder that war leaves scars, both physical and emotional, and that even the most righteous cause can consume those who fight for it. Saw Gerrera is one of the most compelling characters in the Star Wars universe because he forces us to ask difficult questions. How far is too far in the fight for freedom? And at what point does the cost become too great? In Saw's case, the cost was everything, just as Luthen Rael said. But for better or worse, his actions helped lay the groundwork for the rebellion that would one day defeat the Empire. So next time you watch Andor or Rogue One, take a moment to consider the tragic figure of Saw Gerrera. He's not just an extremist or a madman. He's a man shaped by loss, by betrayal, and by the harsh realities of war. And while his story may not have a happy ending, it's a story that's integral to the larger Star Wars saga. All right, that's all I have for now. Before you go, please listen to the tiny voice one more time.
If you're new here or just haven't committed yet, hit that subscribe button, give the video a big ass thumbs up. Doing so helps my channel more than you know, and it'll give you a sense of calm and happiness unlike anything you've experienced in the Star Wars fandom. Warning, subscribing to this channel will not make your family love you more. Unless you experience that happiness mentioned, then your family will see a change in you and be more willing to let you collect Star Wars stuff. Subscribing will also not turn your water to beer, unless somehow this channel is the key ingredient to making your personal beer in your personal microbrewery. But maybe it will help due to the happiness factor. But just in case, subscribe anyway.
Yeah, listen to the tiny voice. Until the next time, this is Gerald, a Star Wars fanatic, signing off, wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way.